Classroom management. Topics in early childhood education. I hope that you are as excited as I was when I first began my journey in early childhood education about 17 years ago. But if you would be so kind, please imagine for a minute that it is just your first day of school as a young and novice teacher, even though you have been preparing for this very day over the past 4 years. You become even more enthusiastic as you see students unloading the school bus and some of them heading to your classroom. As you greet each one at your door, you notice that most do not respond because they are busy talking with their new friends. When the bell rings, you observe that no one is sitting down, but rather everyone is being noisy and rambunctious. You nicely say, "Students, please take your seats," but no one listens to you, especially the two boys who are fighting. You have totally lost control of your classroom in less than 5 minutes and have absolutely no idea of how to handle the situation. The first day of school has just started and you are already overwhelmed. Well, do you think this vignette can happen to you? Leo McInnis, and I am an education consultant at Beyond Measure Home Education Academy. Please afford me the opportunity to begin this PowerPoint presentation by offering you a brief synopsis of what it includes. First, I will define what the term classroom management means. Next, I will discuss what it entails and elaborate on some of the benefits. Then, I will list some common mistakes that new teachers make and reveal a few helpful tips to avoid them. Afterwards, I will explain what an inclusive education is and how to practice anti-biases. And finally, I will expound upon the views of 3 classroom management theorists. Now, you have already learned a lot about classroom management. Perhaps you have heard that it is a set of specific rules that are designed to respond to disciplinary problems. However, discipline primarily deals with student behavior, while rules address deviant action. In essence, discipline seeks compliance, which tends to create distrust in relationships. In contrast, classroom management is not just limited to discipline, but rather includes other things such as routines, time management, instruction and content, and learning activities. Thus, a simple definition of classroom management might be a well-planned set of procedures and routines for avoiding problems and having a plan in place for when misbehavior does occur. After all, effective classroom management facilitates good instruction by first preventing and then intervening in classroom disorder. Moreover, you might find it to be very disconcerting that a chaotic classroom environment is a major contributing factor to teacher stress and burnout. If you called the vignette at the beginning of this presentation, I think you would agree that starting with the first day of school, good classroom management must be consistently practiced and clearly defined throughout the entire school year. Although it is very challenging to meet the needs of all students, one of the many benefits of classroom management is establishing a relaxed and enjoyable atmosphere for everyone. In fact, teachers can appreciate that effective teaching is more likely to take place when students are actively engaged, genuinely interested, and befittingly challenged. When this occurs, students present far less behavioral issues. Moreover, Another benefit from classroom management is efficient use of time. In fact, organizations is the key, while procrastination is the thief of time. In addition, when teachers use classroom management to build healthy and mutual respectful relationships with a diverse student population, these students are more inclined to interact more appropriately and form bonds with their peers. In this regard, cooperative learning activities encourage students to work together to achieve a common goal, whereas it can benefit students at every academic level. In essence, three of the benefits of cooperative learning include academic success, tolerance and acceptance of diversity, and developing social skills. But most important of all, classroom management must promote active learning and student engagement so that they feel empowered to maximize their full potential. While the primary objective of classroom management is to create an exceptional learning environment, new teachers commonly make mistakes that adversely affect this goal, which includes a failure to clearly communicate classroom rules and expectations on day one of school, as well as articulate the consequences for noncompliance. Since one of the ways teachers neglect to proactively prevent problems from occurring is by not being consistent with the rules, routines, and consequences. In fact, any teacher that does not have a written plan of action will constantly see students exhibiting poor attitudes and behaviors. Moreover, waiting too late to mediate minor problems will often lead to escalation. Conversely, administering excessive punishment for a minor infraction will be perceived as unfair, biased, or unjust. For example, a 6-year-old female student was arrested, handcuffed, taken to the Juvenile Assessment Center, fingerprinted, had a mugshot taken, and charged with battery for simply acting out in a classroom. In other words, the failure to triage or prioritize her inappropriate behavior led to an untenable situation. Conversely, many conflicts could be resolved optimally if teachers simply took the time to understand their diverse students' cultural background and prior experiences. To counter common mistakes made by new teachers, there are several helpful hints that can be used to help avoid or overcome such mishaps. Accordingly, new teachers should establish an optimum classroom climate where all students feel safe and have a sense of belonging. Likewise, teachers should streamline the classroom rules and procedures to ensure they are a good fit for the students. For example, the students would need to know what the maximum indoor noise level would be, or at what point do they need to start cleaning up a cluttered or messy classroom. On the other hand, a great way to keep students engaged is by teaching interesting lessons that includes opportunities for active student participation, as opposed to being passive learners. And by all means, teacher needs to always strive for consistency on a daily basis, especially since one of the worst ways to lose one's credibility with students is by being inconsistent in words and deeds. So teachers must follow through with the consequences for any given unacceptable behavior. And lastly, building relationship requires that each one is based on trust and mutual respect. Foundational to good class management is an inclusive education that accepts all learners regardless of their background, learning style, or abilities. Moreover, every child has a legal right to an inclusive education based on two historic laws passed by Congress. First In Brown versus the Board of Education, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Even though it took another 15 years before the law was fully implemented. In fact, I was 9 years old and entering the 5th grade at that time. At any rate, the second law, which is often referred to as Public Law 94-142, not only guaranteed that all children with disability would have access to a free public education, but also to learn in the least restricted environment whenever possible. More specifically, the law stated, to the maximum extent appropriate, handicapped children, including those children in public and private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not handicapped. Thus, a critical part of classroom management is ensuring that the inclusive education is high quality and equitable for all children. Creating an environment that embraces diversity, justice, and equity is a great way to practice an anti-bias education. Moreover, advocating for diverse students' individual identities, learning styles, and unique experiences enable them to feel safe to be themselves. For example, school dress code policy that prohibits certain students from braiding their natural hair can send a demoralizing message about their culture, as well as instill a personal sense of inferiority. On the other hand, two classroom management strategies teachers can use to support anti-bias learning styles include engaging in project-based learning activities and providing differentiated instruction, respectively. Not only do project-based learning activity significantly improve student engagement, but also affords them many chances to learn from each other. Likewise, providing differentiated instruction is a way of rejecting the one-size-fits-all mentality while simultaneously allowing students various ways to express their knowledge. And in this regard, Howard Gardner formulated a list of 7 multiple intelligence, but later added an 8th one, which included linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist intelligence. But typically, public schools only value the first 2 intelligence. However, linguistics only show how to use words verbally and in writing, while logical mathematical demonstrate an ability to use numbers and sound reasoning. As a world-renowned psychologist, Beryl Frederick Skinner's operant conditioning theory was based on the simple concept that human behavior could be modified by reinforcing certain conditions. More specifically, he posited that teachers must assert control over their classroom and use rewards in order to establish the conditions necessary to generate desirable student behaviors. In fact, he thought that students' freedom should only result from effective classroom control, just like he argued that human freedom was a manifestation of effective social control. On the other hand, Skinner rejected the use of reprimands, detention, or physical punishment, for he believed that this would encourage unacceptable behavior as opposed to recognizing acceptable ones. Notwithstanding, a most interesting fact about Skinner's theory is he only conducted experiments using animals, but never used human subjects. Nonetheless, he felt that classroom management effectiveness will rely more heavily on the promptness in which students receive the reinforcer rather than the specific type. Although Skinner's theory has been largely criticized by many others in the field of psychology, his classroom management model is still widely practiced in public schools today. For example, a teacher will praise a previously unruly student for making good behavior choices, or students will receive honors or principal list recognition for making the highest grades. In contrast to Skinner, William Glasser's choice theory suggests every human being, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, or other characteristics, has a need to continue living, to connect with other people, to feel a sense of inner control or achievement, to possess a degree of autonomy, and to have fun. Although it is not known whether Glasser views these needs as genetic or learned, it made no differences with regards to his reality therapy theory, which helps teachers to be helpful, caring, competent, and ethical. In other words, all behaviors derive from an issue of choice. While the origins of Skinner's theory was based on his experimentation with rats and pigeons, Glasser's theory originated from his work with mental health patients at a Veterans Affairs hospital. In fact, he published a very controversial book entitled Reality Therapy, A New Approach to Psychiatry. But since educators value the ideal of holding students responsible for their own attitudes and behavior, they sought Glasser's training program, whereas he published a book entitled Schools Without Failure. Interestingly, choice theory is also widely used as a classroom management tool in today's public school. However, educators must remember that consequences must be connected to infraction, with room left over to repair any consequential damages to the relationship. On the other hand, Alfred Kohn opposed classroom management, but favored a student-centered learning theory, which was a newer and more popular theory than the previous two. Moreover, his vision for a democratic classroom was very closely aligned to the social learning theories of Piaget and Vygotsky. In other words, students assume control and responsibility for their own learning, whereas the educators served as facilitators. In this regard, Kohn argued that an ideal classroom would place its highest emphasis on curiosity, cooperation, and intrinsic rewards, rather than on standardized instruction and testing, homework, and classroom management. Moreover, he criticized using competition and other extrinsic incentives to supposedly motivate students, but in disguise was actually used to establish order and conformity. After all, research studies on the effects of control versus autonomy revealed that the overwhelming benefits were in favor of the latter. Without sounding too cynical, some scholars have argued that a major contributing factor was teachers preferred silence and order more than engaged, happy, curious, and empathetic students. However, the great news is novice teachers can learn how to be intentionally and unintentionally less controlling towards their students, given the medical effects thereof. To summarize this presentation, a major concern for new teachers is their sense of fear, nervousness, and inadequacy with regards to suddenly being held solely responsible for managing a classroom. However, the good news is they will acquire and improve their skills after a short period of time, which will include creating a welcoming atmosphere, being consistent, establishing routines, and treating everyone with respect and dignity. Although new teachers will also make quite a few classroom management mistakes along the way, they must not become discouraged, but rather continue to develop their skills and confidence. Thus, a most important classroom management tip is to realize that it is much broader than student control and discipline. Moreover, teachers should always incorporate an inclusive education and strive to reach out to all students where they are before attempting to move them to the next level. Thus, embracing diversity while advocating for justice and equity are crucial to establishing an anti-bias education. And while both B.F. Skinner and William Glasser supported classroom management, Alfie Kohn argued that students need to assume control and responsibility for their own learning. Regardless of which theories you might agree or disagree, remember that true educational excellence begins with respect for others, which often requires a re-examination of the instinctively biased lenses we use to see reality. Thank you for watching.